I am doing a three-way live session. I got cameras going every which way, so here we go. I'm getting spooled up. So for my Instagram live, I am going to be facing a little bit of everywhere. Hi, Human Kinetics. How you doing? My name is Pete McCall. I'll go into the formal introduction in 1 second. It looks like I am now live on Facebook. So I'm live on Facebook land. I am live on my Instagram page, and I am live on the Human Kinetics page. How's everybody doing today? Hopefully you're doing well. Hopefully we are all getting ready for the end of COVID-19 quarantine at home, but that doesn't mean we don't stop working out at home. My name is Pete McCall. I am a fitness educator, a personal trainer, and a certified strength and conditioning specialist. Yada, 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 all that stuff. I'm a fitness geek. Bottom line, it used to be one of those times when I was in high school, people would make fun of me for being a geek or being a nerd, and you get mad at that, right? You just get mad at that. But now I own the fact that I am a geek. And one of the things I've been doing a lot of during the stay-at-home period is I've been doing a lot of writing and a lot of work. I got another book coming out soon for Human Kinetics, pitch on that. It's going to be great. It's about exercise and the aging process. I am going to be 48 years old here soon, and so exercise and aging has become kind of a passion of mine, and that is that's the theme of my podcast. Maybe you listen to the All About Fitness podcast, but that's what I talk about. I talk about that. I do Instagram posts on exercise and aging. I do stuff on my YouTube channel, the All About Fitness podcast YouTube channel, and that's why, frankly, that's also one of the reasons why I wrote the book, Smarter Workouts, The Science of Exercise Made Simple. And for some reason it's coming up backwards on all the cameras, but it looks like Facebook Live, that's for real. But this is my book, Smarter Workouts, The Science of Exercise Made Simple. And in Smarter Workouts, I'm going to open it up and show you the chapters real quick. In Smarter Workouts, what I do is I kind of divide exercise up into a few different components. You can see in here, what I do is I talk about, I write chapters on mobility training, trying to get past the light there, mobility training. I do mobility training, core strength training, and metabolic conditioning. And mobility really is, if you think about it, we're used to the idea of flexibility, right? We're used to the idea we need to go through range of motion. But mobility, flexibility really, if you look at the technical definition of flexibility, it really refers to joint range of motion. Extensibility is a term that refers to tissue, the ability of your muscle, connective tissue, tendons, fascia to lengthen and shorten. So that's really been, I'm kind of a fascia geek. Did a workshop a number of years ago with Thomas Myers where we got to cut open human bodies and really go hands-on to the actual fascial lines under the direction of Thomas, and really got to literally play with the fascial lines in vivo, which was fascinating. And that's a great, if you ever get that opportunity, I highly recommend it. But I'm a fascia geek. So when we look at mobility is a combination of tissue extensibility, the ability to lengthen and shorten, and joint range of motion. So in Smarter Workouts, I have 7 programs for mobility. It's a lower intensity way to exercise. And it's one of those things where we often think of flexibility, I got to stretch and relax. But the science on that is, if you follow it, the science on static stretch is it's great at the end of a program. But really, at the beginning of a program, we want to do mobility or dynamic warm-up exercises. And we want to really be able to get the body prepared. The other thing is, if you really had a hard workout yesterday, then today would be a great day to do just a mobility workout. And that's what I offered here. One of the other formats of exercise I offer is core strength training. And I don't know if you can see that. That's Instagram, that's Facebook, that's my Instagram. But one of the other things I write about is core strength training. And really, let's look at this. And I think it was Brad Schoenfeld and Brett Contreras did a great review. If you want to see a great review on core strength, do a search. You can go to Google Scholar, do a search for Schoenfeld and Contreras. They did, I think it was 2010. They did a literature review of about 200 pieces of research literature about core training. And one of the comments in their research in the literature is that basically all training is core training. And they say that in their research review is all training is core training. And I'm a big fan of Stu McGill. Stu McGill is the expert on spinal training. And we look at anything that has to do with training the quote unquote core, we integrate the shoulders and the hips. As you say, you can't see the book. I know it's backwards, and I'll try to do a better job of showing the chapter highlights in there. But to go back to it, when we look at core training, anything that integrates the shoulders and the hips is core training. Because here's, I did a great postgraduate fellowship with Gary Gray years ago, and what I learned in that fellowship is we look at everything that goes back to walking, to gait. If we really want to understand how muscles work in the body, we have to understand how muscles work during the gait cycle. And what do we do when we walk? When we walk and run, our shoulder works opposite of our hip. We start with that when we're young, right? When we do tummy time, we extend the spine, we start strengthening all these muscles. When we start crawling, we start working our shoulders and our hips together. And then what happens when we start walking? Well, walking is acyclic motion of our shoulders and hips working together. Well, what muscles connect to all the shoulders and the hips? All the muscles that connect to the shoulders and hips, we can be considered our core muscles. So anything, there's the book Smarter Workouts. There's a book titled Smarter Workouts. It's reversing the camera because I'm using the flip screen so I can see what's happening. But when we look at core training, anything that connects the shoulders and our hips can be considered core training. So a lot of Stu McGill's work is, okay, we do the initial phases of core stability on the ground in a relatively stable environment, but then when we progress up, we want to be up on our feet. So anyway, that's what my core training chapter here, my core strength training chapter in here talks about. And then finally, we get to metabolic conditioning, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is I'm going to talk about program design for metabolic conditioning. Now, what I did in this book, and the reason why it's relevant right now is fitness, well, just now, health clubs are starting to come back open, and I guess I can finish talking about that with one or two clients that I talk with. But this is, in here, you can see all these exercises. In the book, I know there's a little bit of light feedback, so you might not be able to see that. That's my iPad. I got the iPad set up for human kinetics right there. I got my computer, my laptop set up with Facebook, and I got my phone with my Instagram right here. But what I do in the book is I go through mobility training, metabolic conditioning, and core strength training using just one piece of equipment. This book kind of evolved from a series of blogs I wrote for the American Council on Exercise called One Weight Workout. And what I wanted to do is give you the ability to go into the gym or at home, grab one piece of equipment, dumbbells, a kettlebell, a medicine ball, a stability ball, a sandbag, resistance tubing, and your body weight. So I go through how to design exercise programs using just one piece of equipment. And that came from my days as a personal trainer. I'd be working in a large big box gym Monday night, and I'd grab a stability ball and go in a corner and work with a client just using a stability ball. Or I'd grab a medicine ball and go work with a client just using a medicine ball. But I wanted to educate the reader about how to get a great workout using one piece of equipment, because we know what happens at the gym. When the gym, it gets busy. Sometimes we don't have the time, we don't have the ability to use the equipment we want. And so what I wanted the reader to be able to do is to be able to get this book and be able to understand how to get a great workout using just one piece of equipment. Also, it's great for at home, because at home, you may not, if you're Jeff Bezos, you can have your own gym in your house. You can probably have a whole wing of your house as a gym. But for most people, there's not a lot of space. And so we only might be able to have one kettlebell, one stability ball. And I wanted to give people the ability to do that. So we have mobility training. One of the last times I did this, and you can maybe go back on the Human Kinetics Facebook page and go back a few weeks, and I did the mobility workout from the body weight mobility workout of going through mobility, really work on lengthening the tissues and working our thoracic spine and our hips together, because those are the most mobile parts of our body. So that's the mobility workout. Today, what I want to do is talk about metabolic conditioning and really metabolic conditioning program design. Now let's take a step back and realize, and this is the geek in me, and I know when we hear the term metabolic conditioning, we usually think of high intensity exercise, right? We're going to do our Metcon, we're going to get our heart rate up, we're going to sweat. Anytime we exercise, we're doing metabolic conditioning. And that's why I prefer, when I talk about it, when I do lectures, when I talk about it with clients, I call it Metcon, metabolic conditioning. I don't call it cardio. Because if you're breathing, you're doing cardio. Now, if you're watching this and you're not breathing, we got other issues going on, because we've gone from a COVID-19 crisis to a zombie apocalypse, and I don't want to even go there. But really, when we look at it, if we're breathing, we're doing cardio, right? One resting metabolic equivalent is about 3.5 milliliters per kilogram of body weight. We know that. That's what our body uses, the amount of oxygen our body uses while at rest. Well, anytime we start moving, anytime we start doing anything, any physical activity, what goes up? Well, our oxygen consumption goes up. And this is one thing that if you take away nothing else, from my book, if you take away nothing else from my podcast, if you take away nothing else from any time I lecture, the one thing I want people to realize is that we burn 5 calories of energy to use 1 liter of oxygen. And I'll say that again. We burn 5 calories of energy to use 1 liter of oxygen in our body. So what that means is if we're looking at metabolic conditioning, exercise needs to become very energy expensive. And what do we mean by that? Well, muscle tissue uses oxygen to help create energy, right? We know the chemical for energy. We have 2 ways to create energy in the body. I mentioned fascia a little bit. Fascia is the way we create mechanical energy in the body. So that's what the mobility chapter goes into. The mobility chapter goes into the lengthening and shortening of fascia. Because when you lengthen fascia, you store mechanical energy. When it shortens, you release that mechanical energy. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is chemical energy in the body, right? So we have chemical energy and we have mechanical energy. The mobility chapter, the core strength chapter are all about harnessing mechanical energy. Metabolic conditioning, the chapter is all about how we harness for chemical energy, right? We eat substrates, we eat protein, we eat carbohydrates, we eat fat. Some of us are home in quarantine and maybe been eating a few more carbohydrates than necessary. All good, right? But what happens to that in our body, that becomes processed. Carbohydrates and fats become processed into adenosine triphosphate. When you work at a lower rate of intensity, like right now, if you're sitting, standing, watching this live video or watching it later on your phone, right on your computer, you are in your fat burning zone. Fat has 3 carbon bonds. There are 3 glycerols in the fat molecule. What happens when you start right now at a lower intensity, it is easier to cleave off those glycerols. And I think it's and I might get it wrong here, 1 triglyceride, 1 free fatty acid produces somewhere in the order of, I think, 300 some ATP. So 1 molecule of fat goes into the citric acid cycle, the Krebs cycle, whatever you want to call it. That gets spun out and gets converted into 300 some molecules of ATP. I might be wrong on the math on that. I didn't have it written down here in my notes. The point being that fat is one gram of fat when you eat it in your diet provides 9 calories of energy. Fat provides a lot of energy. So at lower intensities, our body is going to metabolize fat as a fuel source. But fat takes a longer time to metabolize from energy. So when you exercise, your body is primarily going to convert from using fats to using carbohydrates for fuel. And there are 2 ways that we burn carbohydrate. Carbohydrate obviously transports through the blood as glucose. It gets stored in our liver and there's our muscles as glycogen. But carbohydrate can either be burned, be converted into ATP with or without oxygen. The process, the breakdown of fat into fuel is lipolysis. The breakdown of carbohydrate into fuel is glycolysis. So lipolysis fat is aerobic, has to happen with oxygen. We do not have anaerobic lipolysis. The body doesn't do that. But the body can do anaerobic, which is without oxygen, and aerobic glycolysis. Now here's where that gets important for exercise. Aerobically, 1 molecule of glycogen can convert, I think it's about 33 molecules of ATP. Anaerobically, 1 molecule of glycogen ends up at about 2 ATP. So therefore, it's not as energy efficient as it would be as we do burning fat. So what's that mean? Okay, so how do we measure that during exercise? Well, when you do metabolic conditioning exercise, what most people call cardio, when you do metabolic conditioning exercise, we can watch our breathing rate. And again, I talk about this in the book. When you're breathing comfortably right now, you inhale oxygen, you inspire oxygen, and you're also exhaling primarily oxygen. All right, you're also going to exercise some other stuff, some other substrates, how you breathe. And if you've ever done that exercise test in the lab, you know you've gone through this, and this is probably a real reminder. But what happens when we start exercising at a higher intensity? Well, our body now needs energy more quickly. So the muscles that are working, the working muscles, will start converting carbohydrate or glycogen into fuel, into ATP. What's a byproduct of carbohydrate metabolism? Carbon dioxide. That's one of the reasons why we start breathing quicker when we're exercising. So if you're out for a walk, if you're out for a jog, you're breathing comfortably, you're with your friend, okay, yeah, you can talk. When you talk, you're working aerobically because you're expiring primarily oxygen as you're breathing. Now, all of a sudden, you're running with your friend and you have to go up a hill and those muscles have to work harder. Well, as those muscles work harder, they need energy quicker. So what's going to happen? They're going to start going into glycolysis. They're going to start spinning off glycolysis into ATP without oxygen. And so what's going to happen is, number one, you're going to become less energy efficient. You're going to be burning more carbohydrate. Number two, you're expiring, and if you hear that breathing in the background, that's my bulldog who's panting. She might start snoring here in a minute. But as you're expiring, you're going to be breathing out more carbon dioxide. So you go, if you're running flat with your friend, you can have a conversation. Yeah, yada, yada, yada. Did you see that show last night? Last Dance? Yeah, that was great. You can have a conversation. But as soon as you start working anaerobically, and as soon as your body starts producing carbohydrate, ATP, from anaerobic glycolysis, and you start working anaerobically, it becomes more difficult to talk because you're expiring more carbon dioxide. Your body is not being as energy efficient. So you're working now, all of a sudden, you have to talk harder, or you have to breathe harder, and so talking becomes more challenging. Now your body is working anaerobically. And again, if you're working and using anaerobic glycolysis, you're only getting about 2, maybe 3 ATP per glycogen molecule. So you're going to be burning through glycogen a lot faster, right? And you're going to deplete that. What's the sign of that, or what happens when you do glycolysis? You get that burning sensation in the working muscles, right? That burning sensation is an accumulation of hydrogen ions, what we call acidosis. The reason why I'm going through this is I'm talking through the science of metabolic conditioning. That is what we mean. So when we do metabolic conditioning, we're attacking one of those metabolic pathways. Now, the other metabolic pathway is stored ATP-PC, the stored adenosine triphosphate, the stored creatine monophosphate in the muscle cells. That lasts maybe 8 to 10 or 12 seconds. That's just immediate, boom. Fire alarm goes off, you need to get out of there. That's your ATP, your immediate energy store. You're doing a 1 rep max, that's your ATP-PC energy store. Other than that, the working muscles are primarily going to shuttle back and forth from glycolysis to lipolysis to anaerobic aerobic. Remember that the polysis is only aerobic. So what that means is, when I wrote the exercise programs here for smarter workouts, is for metabolic conditioning, I did it all based on circuit training. The initial one I did was the initial circuit in there is all based on circuit training. There's a lot of cool science on circuit training of where we go from one muscle group to the other. What happens is we become very energy expensive. Remember what I said earlier. The more oxygen we use, if we burn oxygen, we use 5 calories of energy to convert 1 liter of oxygen into fuel. So anytime we get more muscle tissue involved in our body, we all of a sudden become more energy expensive. So the exercise programs I put in here for metabolic conditioning are all based on movement pattern based circuit training. And I'm a huge bias for that. I don't do isolation. I mean, you can do isolation exercises, but going back to what I said earlier about everything in every muscle in our body is designed to be most efficient when we're on our feet, I wanted to really do movement pattern based training. And remember what I said earlier, right? We learn how to walk, shoulders and hips working together. Now keep this in mind, this is kind of geeky. The 5 fundamental patterns of a hinge, of a lunge, push, pull, and rotation, and I know we have an overhead push, overhead pull, all that, but the 5 fundamental patterns are in the gait cycle, right? Because when both feet are on the ground, we're doing a little bit of a hip hinge. When we're stepping, we're obviously doing that little transition. We're doing that single leg transition. So both feet are on the ground, heel strike, early heel off, we're doing a little bit of a hip hinge. We're doing a split squat actually. Then when we step, we're doing a lunge or a single leg action. As this arm is swinging forward, we're doing a push. As this arm is swinging backwards, we're doing a pull. As that happens, we're getting rotation here. As we get the leg swing down at the hip, we get rotation of the pelvis. So when we break it down, that's our fundamental patterning of how our body works. Well, why is that important for metabolic conditioning? Because all the metabolic conditioning workouts in my book are based on movement patterns. You're going to be doing hinges, you're going to be doing squats, you're going to be doing lunges, pushes, overhead, on the ground for push-ups, overhead for overhead lifts, pulls, rotation. Everything is pattern-based. Now here's the other benefit, because if you're using movement patterns, you're using multiple muscle groups. Whenever you involve multiple muscle groups, you make it more energy expensive. You get more efficient metabolic conditioning because your heart rate comes up and your energy expenditure comes up, your oxygen demand comes up. When all that elevates, your body becomes very energy expensive. So the basic pattern in the programs in the book are all based on circuit training. And what I start you with is 25-second circuits, meaning, or 25-second work intervals, meaning you're going to be about 7. I think the shortest workout is 7 exercises. The longest workout is about 10 exercises. You're doing each exercise for about 25 seconds. bada bing, bada boom, right? That's where you're going to go. So you start there, and then what I try to get you to do by in the book, in the chapter on metabolic conditioning, is start extending that. Go from 25 to 30 to 35 to 40 to 45. Once you get up to doing 45-second work intervals, that's where you want to start looking at other ways we can start organizing the workouts. Because what? We want to make them more energy expensive. We want to be able to consume more oxygen as we're exercising. One way to do that, and I'm a huge fan of this, I'm going to refer, this study actually came out as I was writing the book, and I didn't read that study till after the book was into Human Kinetics, but there's a great study that came out by Sean, S-C-H-A-U-N, and colleagues in 2018. And what they did is they took 3 groups of people. One group did Tabata training, did Tabata intervals on a treadmill. The next group did Tabata intervals body weight. They did body weight, they did like running, they did mountain climbers, they did man makers, they did 4 body weight exercises and did a 4-minute Tabata interval on that. So group A, 4-minute Tabata on the treadmill. Group B, 4-minute Tabata body weight exercises. Group C was running on a treadmill for 30 minutes at steady state. So group C did 90 minutes of exercise a week. Groups A and B did 12 minutes of exercise a week. What groups do you think saw the best results? Groups A and B. In group B, the body weight exercise, the Tabata group that did the body weight exercises, their results were almost as good as group A. And this is a pretty good study because it was over the course of 16 weeks. They exercised 3 times a week over 16 weeks. Normally studies like this are somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks, which is a little short, but 16 weeks is a pretty good data collection point. And what they observed was that doing body weight to body interval training produced almost as good, almost as beneficial results as running on a treadmill for Tabata, and produced better results in terms of aerobic capacity and energy expenditure than 30 minutes of treadmill running. So what would you rather do when you go to the gym? Would you rather get on a treadmill and slog in place for 30 minutes, or would you rather grab a medicine ball and do a 4-minute body weight Tabata with a medicine ball, or do a 4-minute Tabata with a kettlebell? That can be, when you look at it, and I just, for my podcast, I host the All About Fitness podcast. Just recently I interviewed Dr. Martin Kabbalah from McMaster University in Canada, and because a lot of us are working out at home now, and Martin wrote the book 1 Minute Workout based on the science of high intensity interval training. Marty's been studying HIIT training for years, and so we talk about how you can do HIIT training at home. Well, that science is what's in here. That's why if you listen to the podcast, I kind of fanboy out with Dr. Kabbalah a little bit because I use a lot of his work for what I put in here in the Metabolic Conditioning chapter, because Marty's been studying high intensity interval training going back almost 20 years. But whereas most HIIT training has been studied on an athletic population, Marty's lab has been looking at HIIT training towards a relatively non-athletic, towards a relatively sedentary population. What's that all mean for us? Well, that all means that we don't need to be elite level athletes to get the benefits of HIIT training. Now, my next book that I'm working on for Human Kinetics is called Ageless Intensity: How High Intensity Exercise Slows Down the Aging Process. Now, here's the really cool thing, and actually, I have a little more reading to do on this because I'm working on a theory here. But here's the really cool thing, is HIIT training is perfectly safe for people in their 60s and 70s. In fact, if you're older, there might be a greater benefit to doing HIIT training than doing your steady state training because steady state training, aerobic endurance training, can produce a lot of what's called reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species are the free radicals from aerobic metabolism. Free radicals can actually damage the mitochondria and other cell structures, right? So I need to do a little more reading on this because I think that going forward, that looking at as we get older, it might be more beneficial to do shorter high intensity interval training somewhere in the 4 to 8 minute time period. And that means total workout. Because what a lot of people get wrong with HIIT training is you don't need to do a 45-minute class of 6 Tabata intervals. I'm sorry, you don't need to. According to all the data on HIIT, and this is backed up in my podcast interview with Marty, according to all the data on HIIT, less is more as long as we do a really high intensity of the workout, right? So that way you don't need to go, I need to do a 30-minute HIIT workout. No, you need to do a little warm-up, get the heart rate up, get the tissues warm, do 1 4-minute Tabata, maybe 1 5-minute. Another one of my favorites is 30-20-10. I have that in the book. 30 seconds slow, 20 seconds, fast paced, 10 seconds explosively. If you do 5 cycles of 30-20-10, that gets you to about 50 seconds of really high intensity exercise. And again, according to the data, that we only need 50 to 60 seconds of really high intensity exercise to really get aerobic benefits, to get cardio, to improve aerobic capacity, to get cardiorespiratory benefits. So what's that all mean? That means, personally, I think one of the best things for all recreational fitness enthusiasts, for all recreational exercisers, I think one of the best things about this quarantine stay-at-home period has been it's forcing us to recover. Because I really do think a lot of recreational fitness enthusiasts are overtrained. The people that go to fitness studios 4 or 5 times a week, you don't need high-intensity indoor cycling 4 or 5 times a week. You don't. According to the data, we only need 2, maybe 3 times a week of high-intensity interval training. That's it. 2, maybe 3 workouts a week. And I make sure I put that in here. Because what I don't want people to become is chronically overtrained. So I really do think one of the best things about the last 8 or 9 weeks of this stay-at-home period is that people have been going out walking in their neighborhoods. They've been out, they haven't been smashing their face. They haven't been going to these indoor cycling studios 5 days a week and getting smashed. They haven't been going to other high-intensity studios and getting smashed. And I'm never gonna blame the studio, right? It has nothing to, the studio programming is great, but what we need to do, if we're fitness professionals, if we're fitness educators, is we need to do a better job of educating people that when it comes to high intensity training, metabolic conditioning, that less is more. That we only need to do 2, maybe 3 workouts a week, and those workouts only need to be somewhere between 6 and 10 or 6 and 12 minutes long. That's it. And that's really what I try to put in the book. That's really what, the chapter I have on metabolic conditioning goes into that. And then the chapter I have on program design goes into some other structures. It goes into Tabata. It goes into EMOM. I mentioned earlier the 30-20-10. EMOM is every minute on the minute. That's where you can pick out 2 or 3 exercises. You can pick out kettlebell swings and push-ups have been 2 of my go-tos for the stay-at-home period. And when the clock hits 0, I crank out 20 or 25 kettlebell swings. That takes about 20 seconds. If you do 25 kettlebell swings in 20 seconds, you're pretty gassed. So you need about 40 seconds of recovery. The clock hits 0, then I pump out 25 push-ups. That gets you pretty gassed. You do that for 5 minutes for 5 rounds, so you do that for 10 minutes, alternating back and forth. Kettlebell swings and push-ups, you're pretty gassed. That's all you really need. And that really is a workout. Then go out for a 2-mile walk. Take the dog out for a 2-mile walk and bang. There you go. But that's the smart way to do metabolic conditioning. And that's why I call the book Smarter Workouts, is we don't need to go in and crush ourselves. We really don't. Whether you're an enthusiast, whether you're an athlete, whether you're like myself, just someone who just trying to maintain their fitness during the aging process, is we don't need to go out and smash ourselves with every workout. Now, that said, 2 or 3 workouts a week should be relatively vigorous. And that's what all the data is pointing to, that we need 2 or 3 really hard workouts a week. But that's it. And those workouts should come on days when you know they're gonna get good sleep. That's the other thing right now, right? Is bars are closed, no concerts are going on. So hopefully we're all getting to bed a little bit earlier, unless we're getting those COVID dreams. But hopefully we're all getting to bed earlier and we're getting better sleep quality. The reason why I say that is I've started asking clients in classes, if I meet with people on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, if I meet with people for a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday training session or teaching a class on one of those days, I ask if people have plans for the night. Thursday night, people might go out for late dinner. They might go out to whatever they might. I don't care. I have no judgment here. The reason why I ask that is if you're going out in the evening, if you're going to a concert, if you're going to a friend's house, you're going to a party, you might have an extra cocktail or 2. Nothing's wrong with that. I'm not going to give you any judgment. However, if you're going out later and having an extra drink or 2, your sleep quality is probably going to go down. So therefore, as a coach, as a trainer, I am not going to push you that hard. So if it's a Friday or Saturday workout and you're saying, yeah, J-Lo tickets tonight, or I'm going to a comedy show tonight, guess what? I'm going to tell you to take it a little bit easier in class today, because I don't want that to be one of your hardest workouts. Because if you're going out at night, your sleep quality is going to go down, especially if you're over the age of 35 or 40. We know that sleep quality is when our body, we know that the body produces testosterone and growth hormone during the REM cycles of sleep. So if I have you get smashed in the workout on Saturday morning, and you go out and you have cocktails and go to that concert on Saturday night, you're not going to get good recovery. You try to come in and work out on a Sunday, you're going to be running on a half to a quarter tank, and I don't want that to happen. So as a responsible coach, I try to ask ahead of time and say, hey, if you're going out tonight, great, work out, but don't push yourself. You don't need to push yourself. Just keep it under control. Now, if I ask you, you're telling me I don't really have any plans tonight, well, guess what? We're going to put the pedal to the metal, because I assume you'll pass out on the couch by 9:30. Or if we know, we all know what happens, right? Instead of getting in the car and driving to Blockbuster and arguing about what movie we're going to watch and coming home and falling asleep on the couch, we spend 30 minutes scrolling through Netflix arguing about what movie we're going to watch before we fall asleep on the couch. So progress in the modern age. But the point being that we have to think ahead. So it's not just thinking about the workout, it's planning ahead. So when I try to make that point in the book, Smarter Workouts, is really, it's okay as you plan a workout strategy. And what I try to get people to do is think about their workouts during the week. We want, as I said, we want 2 or 3 high intensity interval workouts a week, or 2 or 3 high intensity workouts a week. It doesn't mean we don't work out the other days. It just means those other days they have to be lower intensity. So if we do a Metcon workout on a Monday where we go really hard, maybe we do that Tabata and we crush ourselves, then Tuesday becomes that mobility workout. So now we're still moving, we're taking our joints to the range of motion, we're taking the tissue lengthening and shortening, and then, and then we get into it. And then Wednesday, so Monday was metabolic conditioning, high intensity. Tuesday we can be mobility training, relatively low intensity. Wednesday we can do core strength training, we can do strength training with resistance and be somewhere moderate. And if this was relatively moderate, then Thursday we can jump right back into high intensity training, and Friday maybe we take the day off, and then, but it gives you an idea about how to structure the week. And that really is what I try to put in the book, is I try to put in the book practical advice for how to use exercise to enhance your quality of life. And again, I'm one of those people, I'm one of the few fitness people who will say it's not about weight loss, it's about managing a healthy weight. It's about managing a healthy body weight. Who cares if you're super skinny? In fact, those of you might know this, if you look at the long-term population studies, who has earlier morbidity? People with a few extra pounds or people who are underweight? The people who are lean and underweight actually have an earlier morbidity, meaning when they look at large population studies, the people that are a few pounds underweight actually die a little bit earlier. We don't really know about that, all the things. Plus, we do know what the evidence is starting to accumulate is that people that do excessive amounts of aerobic training and endurance training could be stressing their heart to the point of, again, causing early morbidity. The point being that I'm one of those few fitness people that does not make it all about appearance. I really don't care what the body looks like. And frankly, your muscles don't know what they look like. Your muscles only know, can they generate the force, can they do the work, or can they not? And that becomes my focus, right? The only thing that knows is our brain about whether or not what we look like. As I say, there's some popular Instagram stars doing another live, and I'm sure they're going to be talking all about six-pack abs and all that nonsense. Because really, the only thing that knows what we look like is in here. And for years, I've tried to get, and I talk about this in the book, is I want you to think about work capacity. I want you to think about performance. How long does it take you to do your favorite run? How long does it take you to do your favorite hike? That becomes how you manage your performance. That becomes how you manage your fitness. Don't worry about, manage a healthy body weight. It doesn't mean be irresponsible with your nutrition. It means be smart about it. I always try to get people thinking about being a B student with your nutrition. Being a B student means you're doing about everything right between 85 and 90% of the time. And if you're a good B student with your nutrition, it means you're making the right healthy choices 85, 90% of the time. That 10% of the time, that Thursday evening, that Friday evening, by all means, enjoy, right? I mean, that's the way I try to get people thinking about it. And again, that's why the book is called Smarter Workouts. It's really trying to help the average person understand how to apply the science of all this in a way that works. I've been a personal trainer for a little bit more than 20 years. I've been educating personal trainers. I've worked with the American Council on Exercise. If anybody has gone through the ACE certification the last number of years, I was on the team to help design the integrated fitness training, the IFT model. That's been one of the hallmarks of my career, is helping do that program design model. I'm one of the few people who's written chapters for both ACE and NASM. I also teach online for NASM. So I always joke about I kind of date both women, but I'm very open about the relationship with both of them. The point being, I've made my career about educating people and educating personal trainers about how to apply this stuff in a practical setting. And that's really what I try to do in the book, Smarter Workouts. So today I was talking about metabolic conditioning. Really, you want to get your heart rate up. When you're working comfortably and you can breathe and talk comfortably, you're working aerobically. You're metabolizing fat in what we call lipolysis. Aerobic lipolysis, you're breaking fat for fuel. As soon as talking becomes uncomfortable and you can't talk comfortably, your body has started using glycogen or carbohydrate for fuel, because now you're expiring more carbon dioxide. You understand how to use that. Now you have a guide for how you measure exercise intensity. And that really becomes the key and the trick to metabolic conditioning. So with that, kind of wanted just to talk a little bit about kind of that thought process and being smart about it. If you have one or two questions, somebody's from Turkey, that's pretty awesome because it's late at night for you. You should be working on that recovery. You gotta think, no, it's not that late. I think you guys are 8 or 9 hours ahead. When you do that, so if you have a question, you want to pop it in, I think I might be able to hit that. I'm not really sure how I can see that on Facebook. But with that, I'll be answering on the Facebook page for Human Kinetics. I'll check back in. I can answer questions on Instagram, on the Human Kinetics Instagram page. I will look and see what I can do on my Instagram page. I'll look if you have a question, you want to throw me a DM. I'll be more than happy to respond to that. Again, Pete McCall, author of the Smarter Workouts, Science of Exercise Made Simple, just talking today about metabolic conditioning. Also, you can check out my podcast, All About Fitness podcast. I go into the science of a lot of this stuff. I geek out for a lot of this stuff. So with that, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. With that, I think I'm going to wrap it up. So for those on, thank you, Michelle. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. And if you guys want to hit comments on Facebook, DM on my Instagram, comments on the Human Kinetics Instagram, we'll be in touch. So with that, stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy. Be mindful of wearing the mask when you go out. Be respectful of other people in your area. Wiedersehen, Dankeschön, auf Deutschland. That's about all the German I remember from college. So with that, everybody, hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Mucho gracias. All that, she, if we have any Chinese friends on there. And guys, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm signing that off. Boom.